I'm genetically engineered to live in like frozen bogs near the Arctic Circle. That's where my people come from. So
Welcome to the Greens and Blues 14th Year Podcast. This episode, Zach earns his neurology degree, I become a Chausaholic, and we sit down with the Long Ranger, Justin Simoni. So Zach, what got us interested in talking with Justin Simoni?
Well, Eric, he's not a greens and blues kind of guy. In reviewing his accomplishments, and as the listeners will hear in the interview that follows this, Justin can do all range of hiking effort from green to blue to, I think, pink and purple and red.
Right.
All the colors of the rainbow. He's got a lot of different skill sets. He can bike long range, he can mountain bike, he can gravel bike, he can hike, he can climb, he can scramble, he can do these long traverses. I personally wanted to talk to him because I find him to be an inspiration. He's someone who I followed for a while, and I find his long efforts to be inspirational for my shorter efforts. And I also just think I think he captures an element of what we try to capture here, which is just the love of pushing yourself, the love of the hills, the general joys of mountaineering at any level. He obviously does it at a really high level for very long periods of time. But I think nonetheless, for those of us that live in the valleys and not as much in the mountains as he does, there's something to be gained from his kind of knowledge and the kinds of things that he knows and feels when he's hiking.
For sure. Well, on that note, let's get into it. So we're here with Justin Simoni, the Long Ranger. Justin, thank you for joining the Greens and Blues 14er podcast.
hey, thanks for having me. It's definitely my pleasure and privilege to be here.
I'll tell you, Justin, like I know of you through your two big exploits. Or actually, I started following you when you Everested. Was it Boulder Mountain that you Everested?
I Everested Green Mountain in Boulder,
Mountain.
Colorado.
That's
Yep.
right. Okay.
So that's my local hill.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's where I first
fun little
saw
thing.
you on 14ers.com and have just kind of followed your exploits just as a lurker ever since. So
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, that was a classic Justin Simoni outing for sure.
it was cool. It was cool. I'd never heard
Yeah.
of Everesting until you did that.
Yeah, like the son of who's the first person who summited Everest?
Like Sir Edmund Hillary, right?
Not Hillary?
Sir
Yeah.
Edmund Hillary. His son like emailed me. He's like, "Good on you, mate." I was like, "What?" Because it was
That's
actually his
awesome.
son who it was his son who coined the term Everesting because he was getting ready for some mountaineering expedition. So it was a bicycle thing where you just do endless laps up the local hill. So yeah.
That's fascinating.
That's
Mhm.
really cool.
Is that where you got the idea from?
Where did I get the idea from? I think I just saw other people doing it. And I mean, you look at mountaineering videos and films, you're like, wow, Everest would be a really cool goal sometime, some year, someday. Big John Croc fan too. So I've like, read Into Thin Air a million
Yeah.
times. And it's like one of the things I put on my audiobooks. So when I'm trying to go to sleep, I just listen to it. Um,
Listen to accidents of people dying in the high country.
but like John Krakauer has such a wonderful voice, so he just lulls
Yeah.
me to sleep, even though he's talking about six people dying on a mountain. Yeah, I realize that like it's maybe above my financial ceiling of doing it without some major sponsorship or joining or becoming a guide, kind of like
Mm-hmm.
a Neil Biderman. So I didn't know if it's ever going to happen, but I kind of just wanted to bring it to my backyard and do it locally. So, and it was also that was 2017, so that was kind of a fitness check to see how I was doing in April for a very large project in the summer, which became the tour of the highest 100, where I summited the 100 highest peaks of Colorado and rode my bike to all the trailheads. So, kind of want to make sure, like, can I actually do this? Like, am I getting too old, kind of thing? So.
That was
Yeah,
a fully self-powered, unassisted effort, right? When you
right.
did when you did that?
So self-powered meaning all I did was either ride a bike, which is mostly to and from the trailhead. So I didn't summit any of the mountains on the bike. And then once I got to the trailhead, I left the bike on the trailhead and then just, hiked up to the summit. That took 60 days. So that was my goal, and I made my goal exactly. So I was really, really excited about that. It was a really wonderful experience.
Has anyone ever
Wow.
replicated that or even thought about replicating it? Has anyone ever
Well,
reached
funnily
out to
enough,
you like, "Hey, I want to do this too"?
no, no one ever, no one has ever like been like, "Oh, that's really cool. I totally want to do 100 mountains this summer." There was a gentleman who did it the year before, actually, but he did not do it self-supported. He has friends, and they joined him and like helped him along. So it was more of a celebration of doing this. I think his story was he was getting over some asthma symptoms. He wanted to conquer his asthma, and this was the way he wanted to do it. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Rob Barlow was the man who did it. So he did it in he took longer than me, but is just did in a summer. That was really cool. So I had the idea, but he, beat me to it for sure.
What
He's a cool guy though.
so this is perhaps part of a broader conversation of
Hmm.
like what's your nom de plume or your the name that you go by is the Long Ranger. Uh,
Right, the Long Ranger. So that's sort of my trail name, except I broke the cardinal rule of trail names, and that is you don't get to pick your own. It's
oh,
usually you're like on a through hike and you do something extremely embarrassing, and then that becomes your trail name forever. It just haunts you. But before I got into hiking, I was really into mountain biking and ultra distance cycling. And I had signed up for this bicycle race called the Tour Divide,
mhm.
which is from Canada to Mexico. You kind of leapfrog across the Continental Divide like 36 times. It was to be
Is it on road, gravel? What's it on? Or
It's
mix?
mostly on gravel, so it's
Okay.
not very technical, but it is 2,700 miles long. So there's
That's the
that.
technical part.
Yeah.
It's just
Oh man, it's like day number one. You're like, what did I sign myself up for?
how many
Um,
miles a day is that?
I mean, I averages around 100.
Oh
There's no days
wow.
off
Oh
or
my
anything, but
gosh.
I think like my longest day was 200.
That and so you
From
did
like,
it.
oh yeah, I did it.
That's so much time in the saddle.
Well, I did it twice. And the first time it was like my first mountain bike race ever kind of thing. Like I'm like, oh, how hard could it be? Um, First time I did it, I got to Silver City, New Mexico, which is about 100 miles from the finish of the race.
Yeah, I know. I know Silver.
And
I'm from New Mexico. I know Silver
uh-huh,
City quite well.
yeah, yeah. So the Continental Divide kind of goes near there, kind of the Divide
Hmm.
Trail. And for this little small portion, our route, the Tour Divide route, takes the Continental Divide Trail. And that's where I was. And there was a downhill, and I took it a little too hot, and I hit this like perfect kicker, and I found myself like in the air with all my my mountain bike and all my bike bags, like a little bit out of control, and I landed very screwy, and managed to destroy my front wheel and also my left shoulder. So I had to flag someone to get me to the Silver City ER, and I didn't make it. So the first time I tried it, I didn't make it. That kind of haunts you, because
Yeah,
I
to go
actually
2,600 out of the
right.
2,700
Yeah,
miles.
Right.
yeah.
First mountain bike race. And for strange reasons, I was actually first place by default because I was the only one who had done the actual route. That year there was so much late spring snow
Oh wow.
that a lot of the mountain passes that year were closed. And none of the other racers wanted to do them, and the race organization decided to have an alternate route. But I was like, again, classic Justin Simoni. I'm like, I don't need the alternate route. I'll just take snowshoes and we'll just hike it up and down. So I was the only one that did it. But so by the second day, I was kind of in first place because I was the only one doing the actual route. But on the map, I was dead last because everyone was going around and going way much faster than me.
Yeah.
So like that was on the line at 2,600 miles in, and I biffed it.
Man.
So haunting. So the next year, I'm like, well, I there's no other choice but to like line up for this thing again.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like an online spreadsheet you can kind of like sign up and say what you want to do and give your intentions. and I was a little embarrassed. No one else was embarrassed for me, but I was embarrassed for my performance the last year. So I wanted to sign up, but I didn't want to use my real name, so I just signed it Long Ranger. Um,
Okay.
that's a play of long range, and like
The Lone
it's there's
Ranger.
always this Western theme, you know. It's kind of like the Tour de France, but there's like a Western slant. So instead of like the last place person is known as like the red trolley or something, the last car on a train. So I'm like, yeah, I'm the Long Ranger. That's gonna be cool. And like the guy who's like administrating the spreadsheet kept like deleting my name because he's like, hey, no funny business here. I'm like, no, put it back, put it back. I'm gonna be there. So it was kind of surprising to everyone at the start that I showed up. They're like, I didn't know you were going to be there. I'm like, yeah, because I made it a secret. I was psyching myself out.
So
That's
so
the origin of the Long Ranger.
so if someone was to give you a name based on something embarrassing you've done, what
Right.
would it be?
God, what would it be? That's the thing. Like I do so many things alone that when I do embarrassing stuff, like no one sees it, which is
Yeah.
great. It would probably be something about like my ankle or like something like Chossaholic or something. Like it's got to be so embarrassing that you'll never be able to let it down, kind of thing. You know,
Yeah.
it's got to be something that like from a half a mile, someone yells it, and like whoever you're trying, like you're hiking with, and you're trying to be cool with, it just automatically destroys that, and you're just like, yeah, I'm just a slouch like everyone else. So I'm not sure. It remains to be seen to actually be granted to have that privilege is not something I've actually attained yet.
So you said you've been doing these kind of long efforts, started out as a biker, moved into
Mhm.
hiking, and I want to ask about the transition to hiking in a sec, but
Sure.
what's the allure of like when I read about the stuff you've done, like the Sangre Traverse,
Hmm.
the self-powered effort, 60 days is a long time to be doing anything. Like
Yeah.
what's the allure of that? Or I not to get too philosophical here, although you can see my books
Mhm.
behind me. That is my job. So I'm actually a philosophy professor in
Uh-huh.
my real
Oh, cool.
life. But like what's the allure of that? Like why do you do that?
Oh, like Alone in the Wilderness time?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, or just these long efforts that are most people are going for like quick and dirty these days, right?
right.
Like the quickest I can do all the 14ers in a car with like people stuffing pizza down my throat. And
Yeah,
you're
right.
like, no,
Um,
I want to go the slowest possible
yeah,
way and just grind at a problem for two
yeah.
months on end.
That's not enough pain and suffering. How can I have more pain and suffering? Yeah, well, like when philosophy goes, I'm a very much an existentialist. So yeah, you make the trip what you want it to be, kind of thing. You find the joy in the pain. I think it comes from my childhood, and I grew up in a family where we had a sailboat. So I was kind of used to kind of longer trips going slower and being a little bit more self-sufficient. You know, if we don't sail this boat right, we're never going to get to our destination.
Hmm.
And like God bless my parents, like we would go to, I grew up in Connecticut and we'd go to some place like Block Island. So it would take us like
Yeah.
all day to get there, and then we'd anchor the boat. And then what my mother liked to do, it's very much like summoning 14ers, to be perfectly honest, is like she liked to collect lighthouses, which means
Yeah.
we just visit the lighthouse, take a picture, a selfie basically, and like go back. But like we'd like walk 10 miles to do these lighthouses because my father was a marathon runner, an ultra marathoner actually. So like, this was all part of the course of my growing up. Like, find the more a difficult way of doing something, maybe it's more satisfying that way. So that's sort of the speed that I grew up in and kind of the ethos that was imbued in me. Like a lot of things can happen on a sailboat. It's not the safest mode of travel, but it can also be really fun. Like you're doing a thing, you can do it your own way. You can go fast, you can go slow. That's sort of where that came from. Car culture never really grabbed onto me and was like, yeah, you need a really fast sports car when you're young. I was more into skateboarding, so I'm like, I'm just gonna pedal around my skateboard, and like go off these stairs and hit this curb or something and just make it a creative act of just traveling. So yeah.
And you don't even own a car now, do you?
Nope. I had a car for a couple of years. Last car I had, I bought for $800. And it was fine. It was from this guy I knew in Indiana. And he's like, I'm just going to go car free forever. I'm like, that's a wild idea. I don't understand, but okay. And sure enough, it was my last car. Drove it from Indiana. And then like it lasted like a year before it just cost too much in maintenance to be worth it. I just like donated it to NPR and got a bicycle from the thrift store for $14, fixed it up. And I was like, well, I don't know, like the grocery store is a mile and a half away. I lived in 20th and Market in downtown Denver, which is a block away from like the baseball stadium. So like everything came to me, right? I lived in an art gallery. So like if I wanted to go out, I just went out my gallery door and there I was. There was usually an art opening or some sort of party going on. Yeah, it's just worked out really well. I mean, Denver's bike infrastructure is actually pretty incredible, to be honest. So I had everything I needed. And then I realized, like, I didn't go in knowing this, but like, I really loved riding bikes. And the longer I rode the bike, the more fun it was. So within a year of like getting that thrift store bike, I was in Vancouver, heading south towards Tijuana, going, let's ride across the country for my first time. So it got hold of me. And even in that like first bike tour, I was just on a road bike or whatever. I had like a guidebook that, it's every chapter's a day or whatever. And I
Mhm.
get to the end of the chapter and I'd be like, well, I want to keep going, you know? So it's like, "Oh, 30 more miles, let's do 30 more miles." And I get to the end of that chapter, I'd be like, well, let's just keep going. Like I liked what I liked about it was the riding of the bike rather than the camping or the socializing and stuff. So
Yeah.
I had to stop myself once. I was going through like this incredible giant redwood grove, it's just going like 40 miles an hour down a hill. And I was just like, Justin, stop. Like you're camping here. Like this is too incredible. You're not going to see this for who knows how long. Like you got to check this out. So, yeah. For whatever reason, my body was just so adept to like all day efforts from kind of the get go. Yeah, I didn't know that. I kind of grew up thinking I was just a very runty person, kind of a runt of the family. My sister was the athlete. She got a full scholarship to her college, maintained a 4.0 GPA. She was also the smartest one in the family. And I just felt kind of runty, kind of like didn't really know my place in life. So it was a big revelation to me that I had something there too. It's
Yeah.
kind of like what my father had. And,
You have
you
a
know,
talent.
a talent for like low levels of
It,
high amounts of low levels of pain, I guess.
yeah. Yeah. That's a thing. Like a lot of people don't have the internal kind of psychological constitution to just grind.
Yeah, I've been like kind of wandering around in my psyche and like where's that coming from? Does it come from a good place in my head or a bad place? Is this a positive thing or a negative thing? But I also think it's just like those sailing trips that we took where we're on like this dinky little sailboat and like a storm is coming. And like you have to kind of keep it together to like not freak out and be like, let's sail to the nearest port and get safe. And like we all need to work together to do this. And that kind of I try to have that in my mindset rather than like, don't fear the reaper.
So you're talking like a calm kind of a fortitude that you've got when I assume when you're preparing for a journey, but also while you're in the midst of it too.
Oh, sure. I mean, that 60-day trip, like I am nothing but happy to be out there. You know, I think in just normal life, like I have a kind of a heightened state of anxiety. And it's just that my emotions or the way I'm wired is like once I'm doing something, a long distance hike, where there is some unknown or there is some risk or danger, like it actually lowers down where I just feel a little bit more natural and normal. Yeah, that's definitely something I'm exploring. Like, why is that?
It sounds like Zen,
Oh, maybe, yeah,
like meditative practice of a
right.
sort. I mean, there's all kinds of cool neuropsychology that shows that when you get into these flow states, it slows down all kinds of cognitive processes that probably in your normal everyday state are on overdrive a little bit, and
Right, right.
you're able to kind of tap into to
Yeah,
some kind of sense of true engagement for a little bit.
sure. And I think like when I was much younger and I discovered bicycles as an adult, Like just being able to, ride your bike really fast with no one around, you have that feeling like you're flying. And I definitely think there's like this great amount of pleasure just doing that. So yeah, trying to capture that again in a variety of ways is definitely something I enjoy doing. It's always special when it happens,
You
Welcome
look
to the
like you have
Greens
a
and
question.
Blues Neurological Podcast.
Right.
To kind of pivot back to your big kind of first self-supported effort, what's the transition from riding bikes for long distances to now riding a bike for long
Yeah.
distance? Because I have a feeling that was at least 1,000 miles or so of riding in
Mhm,
that effort, but also now you're hiking and
mhm,
you're doing full on scrambles for sections
mhm.
of that as well, or even
Yeah.
some class 4 hiking for portions of it.
Sure. I mean, I traded in the Bowie knife for a Swiss Army knife, kind of. I again like it. There's so much of my childhood that I can relate to what I do now, and it's funny because I grew up in Connecticut, which isn't known for its like awe-inspiring mountain peaks and grand vistas. To be honest, like I was introduced to rock climbing when I was 12. The social services department in my little town was just a bunch of rock climbers, and they would take us to do like club outings in middle school and high school. So I found I really loved to do that and had that kind of in my back pocket. And like I said, my father was an ultra runner. One of my first memories was going to one of his races. And like again, this is the 80s. And at the time, like it wasn't Leadville 100. It wasn't the Western States. It was some random high school track in Washington, D.C. that you would do laps constantly around for 24 hours.
Oh dear.
And someone would be at the finish line taking note in how many times you crossed the finishing line. And every 6 hours, you switch the way you went. We would go to Washington, D.C. to see my dad do these races. And I would just, we'd check out the museums and stuff, check back on him and things. So like that idea of like that's something that you do came in pretty early in my memories. But when I transitioned myself from cycling a lot to running, it was because I hurt my hand and I couldn't hold on to my handlebar. And I was getting ready for something called the Colorado Trail Race. And there's a lot of mountain bike, like it's a mountain bike race, and
Yeah.
you follow generally the Colorado Trail. It's about 750 miles long. And I really need to keep my fitness up and gain some fitness. So I'm like, oh man, what do I do? Well, I'm like, I guess I'm running. I'm like, I guess I'm running up and down mountains. So I was living in Denver at the time, and I would just take the bus to Boulder and do some laps up Green Mountain and come back and feel happy about myself. And yeah, I realized I loved to run as well. Unfortunately, to me, the man who has too many hobbies.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then like I did the Colorado Trail. That was a really amazing experience. That was in 2013. And yeah, I think in like that winter or that year, I was just like, wow, there's these things called 14ers. I don't have a car. I want to do them. Like that sounds like fun. Like how do you can you just use a bike? Like has anyone done that? Like what's that look like? Where do you start? I did the research I could. There wasn't a lot of notable trips like that.
Hmm.
And like the fastest one was like 37 days, kind of self-supported. Like his wife would visit him at trailheads and make him dinner, but like basically what we would think is self-supported now that we have more established definitions. Now that I've had some racing experience, like long distance racing experiences, I was like, why don't I just take like this bike packing ethos and the rules and just apply them to this new challenge, I was like, I don't see why I couldn't. I moved to Boulder the next year and lived like a monk, just training for this thing that started in July. That's sort of how it happened. I mean, when I started running just on flat road, like I was that guy. Like it wasn't that long ago where I'd have to run for like a mile and then walk for like half a mile and then
Yeah.
run a mile.
A
Oh,
I just couldn't.
fartlek.
yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Just couldn't. I couldn't keep up. I didn't know how to pace myself. I just wasn't strong in the way that runners are strong. So yeah, I had to start from square one again, which is kind of fun. That again, that beginner's mind.
Yeah.
It's very humbling when you think you're really good at, a really
Mm.
great athlete, and you just try something completely new, and you're like, this is not. I'm not good at this.
Yeah. Biking is not transferable to running in the same way that you hope it is.
No, no. I did find out I was really good at the gate to like trudge up hills because that's
Mhm.
very much like pedaling.
Yep.
But the downhill was a whole nother story, and my legs would kill afterwards. I
Hmm.
would get the the gnarliest cramps, you know. Oh my gosh. So yeah, there was some holes in my fitness for running.
So now we'll fast forward to 2017.
Sure.
Justin's doing this super long effort, 100 the centennials. Did you do the cent because there's centennials a misnomer, right? Because there's 104 of them, but
Yeah, my list had 105. I wanted to
okay.
make sure I got everything.
So, so you do 105 peaks. I remember kind of watching you as you were doing this because you had a forum on 14ers.com at least at the time
Mhm.
for this effort. I not to be too trite, but like what were the highs and the lows, Justin? Like what was the best part of that and what was the worst part of it?
I guess this is what was attractive to me in kind of getting to your other question was like every day is completely different. And there's a lot of surprises, and every day has those high highs and those low lows. I do remember like when I started out that particular trip, I just really was not into the idea. I did it because I said I was going to do it, and like I had a few people that were counting on me, but no real big pressure like that. But it's like anything, like like when you want to do a run or you want to do some exercise and you really don't want to do it, but you're like, well, I'll just start. And if I like don't like it after 5 minutes, I'll just go home. Like I had to do that for a 60-day trip.
Oh
Did
my
you ever get
gosh.
into it? Was there ever a day where you're like, I faked it and now I finally made it? Or was it just,
Yeah, yeah, oh, totally. Yeah, I think like after the first peak, which was Pikes Peak, I was like, all right, this is cool. I always like I'm like anybody, like I have major questions and self-confidence issues of like, do I have the fitness to do this? Like I've signed up for like a big idea. Like this is a big unknown. Like, can you do this? Like the elevation gain and loss on this stuff is like insane. I'm like, was this a good idea? Am I gonna destroy myself? Like, I don't know. I have a lot of questions here. Yeah, like once you get into like, the rhythm of it, and you're like, wow, all I have to do for the next 2 months is ride bikes and climb mountains. Oh, this is okay. I like this is a huge privilege to be able to do this, and I should be nothing but happy. And I can't believe like former Justin was like, "Yep, future Justin, this is what you're going to do." It's like this is awesome.
Well, I'm glad to
It's
hear you
really
say that it's a privilege because as you're describing it, I'm thinking, man, you had that low of a low every single day. Like, I think, and that probably just speaks again to the fortitude that you've got to be able to plow through that every day and look forward to, okay, well, there's got to be a high somewhere in
right,
here. But
right.
to have that fortitude that's pretty remarkable, man.
Yeah, like just to take a random example, like I'm in the Maroon Bells, and you wake up and like it's painful.
yeah.
Your back,
Mm-hmm.
my back hurts, my legs are just like screaming because they're sore. It's like,
So what day is this? This is like
this
near
will
the
be
end?
like this is like day number 50 or something.
Yeah.
We're
Okay.
we're
Yeah,
into it.
you're
This
Yeah.
is
because
the last.
you went from Pikes to the Sangres to the
Yep, and
San
then
Juan.
kind of did a general like clockwise direction. So I
Yeah, yeah.
probably like went to the Sawatch first and then dipped into the Elks and then did the rest of the Front Range or something. Whatever my inner algorithm said was the most efficient way. But yeah, this is pretty far into it. So that morning, like I finally got up from my bivy site, and like you're trudging up Maroon Peak, and it is like 2,000 feet or 3,000 feet of just this hill, and I'm just thinking, I'm like, is this really what we're doing? I mean, I'm sure we can all identify it. It's just like, God, this is a long way up just to get to like to the good stuff. But then you like summon, you're like, oh, that was really cool. That last part was cool and scrambly. And then, I have the traverse in front of me. And by then I'm like engaged and energized. And I'm like, I love this traverse, it's so much fun. I'm gonna find a better way to do it this way. And I forget about the all the soreness, it all goes away. And I'm like looking forward to the downhill. I'm like, I bet I can run it, knowing I also have like Pyramid Peak that day to do or something, something crazy.
Did you
Or
connect
like I
them?
have to get up and
Or
over Independence Pass or something
Mm.
just wild.
yeah, did you connect them that day? Did you do more the bells and pyramid same day?
Not that trip, I don't think so, because I also had to do Thunder Pyramid. So I
Oh
think I did
yeah.
Pyramid Peak and Thunder Pyramid. And then another day I did the Maroon Bells. And then after I did the Maroon Bells, I think that night I tried to go over Independence Pass. But let me tell you, just as a word of warning, like riding a bike over Independence Pass in the middle of the night, not a great idea.
No, that section right on the east side where it's like there is no railing or anything there.
No.
That would not be enjoyable on a bike, even
Yeah.
during the daytime.
I was like, I'm just gonna like I had to bail like halfway through. I was like, I'm just gonna camp. Like
Mm.
it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like the cars are not looking out for me, and to be honest, it's a weird place for a bike to be in the middle of the night, so I kind of understand. I'm like, I agree with the cars on this one, so I just wait for the morning. Like again, the mountains will wait. Like I'm setting the record, so let's set a good example of what to do.
Well, and not Silver City like die near the end of the,
Right, right,
Mm.
right. Like that
Yeah.
would be like a low.
it's like an
The
Oregon
high
Trail
was yeah,
tombstone. Here lies
right,
Justin.
right.
He made it
Ooh,
52 days.
yeah. It's like made out of bike parts. Like, well, that's weird.
I mean, it does seem like the way you talk about it and your mention of existentialism, it does seem like just this kind of absurd quest.
Oh, sure.
You
Yeah.
made up this thing that didn't, I mean, it is a thing, like, right? Doing all the centennials is kind of a thing, or it is a thing in the
Sure.
last 20 years, but like,
It's a
it's arbit
lifetime goal.
it's a life,
Mm.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
not like a one summer goal, and certainly
Right,
not
right,
self-powered, and certainly not on a bike that you like
right.
carry for parts of it. But yeah, it just seems like you bought in at a certain point. It's absurd. It's kind of, I'm going up a 2,000 foot hill today, and then I'm going to find the thing at the top, and I'm just going to lean into this until it means something to me.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Early, like when I was in college, Justin got into the existentials pretty hard. But yeah, like I think a lot of people now have like discovered Viktor Frankl and Man's Search for Meaning and
Yeah.
stuff. And that book really hit me pretty hard. I thought it was a really wonderful book, to be honest. But I was also like, like totally into like Jean Genet, which is another French existentialist. And he was like during World War II, he would just like go from town to town in the French countryside and like get into all these like really big messes and like kind of get through it. And but like it always like it's so easy for me to be like at home and just kind of like drinking coffee and having breakfast, and then that idea pops in your head like, hey, you know what if and then something goes on. It's like, what if I just ride my bike to all the 14ers? Like, is there someone going to stop me? Like, what if that could like what if I just do an Everesting of the local hill? Like, has that ever been done? Like, I don't know. Like, why don't I do it? Like no one, I don't have to ask permission from anyone to do this,
No.
Right.
unless I'm like
Yeah.
going out with someone. I'm like, hey, honey, what if I'm not here this summer? Is that okay?
You are utterly free, which is, I guess, part of the allure of what you do. Like that, as you said, all I'm going to do for the next 2 months is ride my bike and climb mountains.
Mhm.
And there's a very particular kind of freedom that accompanies that, right? It's
Yeah,
the,
sure. But it's not super rare. Like this is kind of ethos of the through hikers, like you wake up from camp, yes, you hike until you don't wanna, and then you make camp again.
yeah.
But there's a beauty of the simplicity for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Although what I do is a little more extreme than like a through hike. Like through hikers are there for longer. Doing the CDT takes a very long time. That's a big investment in time.
Is there anything extraordinary that happened on that centennial effort? A morning where you woke up and there was a moose standing next to you, or you stood on the top of Antero Peak and saw God or something. Like, is there just a moment that sticks out of that particular journey?
Well, yeah, I mean, there was a lot of moments like that. And that's maybe another reason. It's not the main reason, but it's like this really wonderful side effect of doing these where I can be traveling all around Colorado and look up at a mountain and be like, oh yeah, that one time I was on this crazy trip. I've been there, that's cool. So since you mentioned Ontario, yeah, I was on the top of Ontario during the solar eclipse.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and that was really cool. And it was kind of like really busy that day because everyone wanted to be on top of Ontario for the solar eclipse. So
Yeah.
like lots of Jeep crews were there. But yeah, I mean it's just so otherworldly where it's all of a sudden it's like dusk in the middle of the day. Like, oh yeah, that's today. I did have some bear encounters that trip. again, speaking of the maroon bells, I remember like being woken up by the camp host. I think it was that year. The pots and pans being smacked by the camp host. I woke up. I'm like, "What are you doing?" And the camp host is like, "Don't you see the bear?" And I didn't because I didn't have contacts on. I had my contacts on. I'm like, "Where is the bear?" And she's like, "In between us." I'm like, "I now see the bear." And then there was another a couple days later where I left my bike at a trail junction and did a some huge day, full day. I came back and the bear had completely found my bike and I'd gone through all my bags and just destroyed them. I was like, oh, like
Oh
there's no food, but
Man.
it just smelled the wrappers and was going
yeah.
for it. Some bear encounters, but yeah, like when you're a couple days from finishing, it's hard not to well up, have your eyes
Mhm.
well up and be like, oh my God, this thing's almost over. I don't want it to go. I don't want it to end, but it has to, kind of thing. Like finding a new best friend and knowing you have to like go your separate ways, kind of thing. So yeah, it was always like kind of bittersweet at the end because on the other hand, you are like destroyed, physically and mentally and emotionally, and you're
Mhm.
like,
That's
wow,
got to
what
be a
you
part
really
of it, right? Like there's a point
did.
where your body's like, okay, dude. I mean, how much
Yeah.
weight? I think I remember seeing you posted how much weight you lost on this, or did
Yeah, like I'm a big guy, so when I do lose weight, it's usually a big number too, but it's like the first couple weeks I'll like drop 10, 15 pounds, and then it's like the slow, every week it's just a little bit more. So like yeah, it does seem like at this effort there is like a time limit.
eventually, not to be too crack hour about this, but you're going to be Chris McCandless by the end of this thing, like just
Right,
consuming
right,
more calories than
right.
you can put into your body, right?
That's the problem, right? There's just no way to eat enough at this effort. There's just absolutely no way
Mm.
because not only am I doing these long distance rides and these hikes, I'm not sleeping all that much and it's cold at night. So like I remember coming home from that 60-day trip and my girlfriend at the time was there to greet me. She spent the night and she's like, I had to get out of the bed. Like you were too hot. Like you were just
Yeah.
pumping out the BTUs. Like it was uncomfortable just to be around you. I'm like, oh, because I finished like in the middle of September, so things were getting kind of cold above tree line. But it's amazing how the body adapts. What was amazing about that is something that can't be put into words. You just kind of have to be there. It's fun to like realize that you have to kind of imagine that you're not in the same space as you usually are and you're on this like quest, and you can get into that mindset that like you're not part of the real world right now. You're kind of like doing this fantasy thing and then kind of go with it, kind of
Mm.
like any sort of pilgrimage into the deserts or,
Hmm.
I'm tipping some windmills, that's for sure. Like, let's be honest,
Oh, it
in the
is
night.
very, very quixotic like that,
Right,
right?
right.
Um,
Absolutely. Coming back, crash landing back in the real world is pretty rough, I'll have to say.
Mm.
I think I spent like a week on the couch just sleeping in my sleeping bag.
yeah, I remember when I was a senior in high school, I went to Alaska for 2.5 weeks and backpacked above the Arctic Circle. And I remember the first time I heard noise again,
Yeah,
like in an airport, it was overwhelming.
yeah.
Yeah, and I remember just sitting in a dark room eating Chips Ahoy for like a day and a half.
Right,
Just
right.
like
I
I
think
need
I remember the first time I got back into a car, I'm like, oh, what are these things? We don't need this.
It's like a caveman lawyer on Saturday night. What
Right,
are
right.
these things? Maybe we should pivot to the Sangre effort.
Sure.
Yeah, I was hoping you'd kind of summarize it and kind of go through, as kind of did with the Centennials as well, kind of the highlights and if you want to share lowlights as well, but kind of just work through how you prepared for it and yeah, kind of
Mhm.
work through the most impressive parts of it for you.
So the Sangre de Crisco Range Traverse is a route across the Sangres, lengthwise, not widthwise, that starts between Salida, Colorado, with the northern terminus of the Sangre de Cristo Range, and basically Little Bear Peak at the southern end. The Sangre de Cristos as like a mass of mountains keeps going in New Mexico, but we're not talking about that. We're just talking about like that very pencil thin mountain range that you find in Colorado. The traverse itself is you just follow the ridge line. There's a main ridge line, it doesn't stop being a ridgeline through the entire thing. So once you're on it, you can just follow it, just naturally follow it as if it was a trail itself, which is really freaking cool. Like, like you can get on the ridgeline. Say you started in Salida, you can look south and you can see your destination. You can see the next few days.
Mm.
So it's very captivating. It does include Cresto Peak, Cresto Needle, Ellingwood Points, Blanca Peak, and Little Bear. So you bag 514ers while you're out there. I don't know if there's anything like it, exactly like it in the state. It's so incredible. Like what makes it also kind of amazing is that there are no foothills in the
Mhm.
Sangres. So like when you're on the main ridge line, the mountains just fall back on each side. Like you can see the valleys below.
Mhm.
And like you always have like 5,000 feet of air below you. It's just, that feeling you have on like a summit of a mountain. You're like, wow, the view is so amazing. This is incredible. That's every day on the Sangre de
It's
Cristo Range for me.
continuous.
It's just continuous. Yeah. So it wasn't my idea. I got this idea from a man named Brendan Leonard, who tried to do himself with a hiking buddy in 2013,
Hmm.
and he got as far as like California Peak. They weren't in a rush. This was taking a couple of weeks. They did food drops and water drops and stuff. And they were going to take pictures and get some beta out for an article for Backpacker magazine, which is where I read about it. And when they got to California Peak, they got this incredible rainstorm and had to bail from the route. So they were like a day from finishing. Very
Yeah, I mean
similar
that's
to
the
like
southern.
river hiking.
That's like
Mm.
basically it
You're
right
almost in New
there.
Mexico. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that storm that they hit turned into the flood, the same storm that caused the flooding in Boulder and Denver.
Oh
So
yeah.
it was a huge, huge system that like
Oh
finally
man.
got them off the mountain. But I read this and I was like, this is incredible. Like, what an amazing idea. Like, I don't know how many 14ers I had done at that point, like five, but I got it in the back of my mind. I'm like, all right, let's try this one day. Like, this is too insane.
Well, and anyone
Um,
that's driven the San Luis Valley
yeah.
has looked up. At least me. I went to. I'm from New Mexico, but went to
Hmm.
school in Colorado, college in Colorado Springs, and I drove that San Luis Valley 7, 8 times a year. And every time I look at that ridge line, and it just inspires that like you could that'd go,
Yeah.
right?
Mm.
You
Like
just
you
walk
should be
that,
able to
can't
do
you?
that.
Yeah. Can you walk it? I don't know. Like,
Can
has
it,
anyone
it
tried
looks like it
walking it?
goes, right?
It
There's
looks like it
nothing
goes.
cliffy on it, right? Like we can do
Right,
this.
right. Yeah, it's fine. Bridge, cross that bridge when it gets there. Yeah,
Yeah.
and upon doing more research on it, I found out the first time someone tried to do it was in 1961, and they got all the way from Salida. Basically, they got to, was it Marble Pass?
Oh well, that's a ways.
Yeah, it was amazing. And I
Yeah.
guess they were like, we've had enough.
Yeah.
But like at the time, there was no map of the range. It was just like it was like the map of around Salida and like the Crestone, sorta, and then like Blanca Peak. Everything in the middle was just like the RB Dragons. So they're like just going out for it. It's kind of amazing. So it's possible that like that trip they did some first ascents, some minor first ascents. Like I know they named some of the mountains. Like they named one of the mountains Thirsty Peak because they
Oh
were
yeah.
completely and utterly out of water.
Yeah.
So that was really cool to
Oh,
know it's
that's where
been.
that comes. I've
Yeah,
hiked Thirsty Peak. I didn't know that's where that came from.
yeah, they were
Okay,
like totally out of water, so they were like, well, I guess this is Thirsty Peak.
that makes
Like it
sense.
was so
Hmm.
funny. Like it's such a different world because they were resupplying at mining camps. They'd like
Hmm.
drop down and like find some random miners, I guess, and be like, can we get some bread from you? That was so cool. So yeah, it's fun to know that it's been on people's minds for 70 years or so.
Hmm.
So I decided to do my trip in 2019 initially, and I started in Lake Como Road, and I was
Hmm.
going to go north. And yeah, I didn't know what to expect. Like I definitely have done the Crestones and Little Bear and Blanca and stuff. Yeah, other than that, I didn't know really what to expect. It just kind of went for it. But it was like again, like such an incredible experience. So first day, the first day, you have to get to the base of the Southwest Ridge, which is like 6 miles of bushwhacking. And then you do the Southwest Ridge, which is like 3 mile ridge line to get to the top of Little Bear.
Hmm.
And then after that, you have to do the Little Bear blanket traverse.
That's a hell of an
Yeah,
introduction.
that's
Right.
a deal
That's your
there.
introduction.
It's probably the hardest part of the whole route, though, right?
Yeah, it's one of the hardest parts. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you get to Ellingwood, which is, it's fine. But then you have to get off of Ellingwood and keep going north. And there's like this major ridge line there too. Like it's like another Little Bear blanket traverse.
Yeah.
Oh
And then
man.
like after that, there might be sort of some realistic camping options. So like I remember having to move it, like trying to get to a place where I'm not like just huddled on like, like a part of a ledge that's kind of out of the wind for the night.
Oh my
It was
gosh.
insane. Yeah, and of course, like I had 6 days of food with me, so like I had like a 40+ pound pack.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yep.
this is not the terrain you want to have like 40 pounds on. It was like that. I was like, whoa, this is the first day. Like, what's the second day going to be like? And again, it's just insane. Like it's on paper, it looks easy. You go over this little mountain called Mount Zwicken, which is
Hmm.
barely 12,000 feet,
That's
but
right
it's
near the sand dunes,
sand
right?
dunes. Yep.
Yep.
Yep. But like there's no trail on Mount Zwicken. And
Nope.
it's just the most incredible like down like blowdown and bushwhacking and it like everything's like pointy and sharp and wants to like murder you and there's cactuses and it's
And then
just
you
it was
climb up from that onto Mount Herard, right? Is that am I right in thinking that?
yeah, I think so, something like that. Like you get a little bit of reprieve where like there's
Yeah.
water again and then you kind of go off towards like Milwaukee Peak
Yep.
and like there's a little bit of reprieve and then you're like in the thick of it again where like oh after Milwaukee Peak is like a Broken Hand Peak which is
Hmm.
no slouch. Like I
No.
had no bait on that, I didn't know what to expect. And then the Crestones again, like you're like what I have to do the Crestone traverse in within this huge trip. So yeah, I remember like I spent the night on top of Crestone Needle just because that's when darkness fell on me.
Oh, that's
I was like all
nuts.
right,
Wow.
cool.
Do you, because I know it's part of the story. What were you sleeping in for this traverse? What was your sleeping arrangement? Were
Oh, I
you
mean,
sleeping
like,
in a bivy?
yeah, I had a 35-degree bag. I had a baby sack that wasn't waterproof. Like, I probably had like some like mylar sheeting to put down up below, but yeah, pretty minimal. Like, I was trying to go as light as possible because there's just so much terrain to hike. The route's 120 miles and 66,000 feet of elevation gain and loss. Like it's mind blowing. Like you're like,
Wow.
what? Like that's 2 Everests, I have to do with all my gear. Like, are you kidding? Like there's no trail. It's
No.
like at best it's talus. I got up that day from Crestone Needle, and you're like, oh, I just have to traverse from to the peak, and then there's a little bit of reprieve again to get to like Obstruction Peak,
Hmm.
and then there's this ridge line between Obstruction and Mount Adams that's like
That's
even gnarlier than the Crestone Traverse, and you're like,
yes.
what is this?
That's I was going to ask about that because that to me actually when I looked at it that seems like the real crux of it
Right.
or that
Oh, it's incredible. Like, I mean, knife edge ridges. Like one side's overhanging. Like it's absolutely awesome. Like if you love scrambling, like it's the Shangri-La. Like the Crestone Traverse, don't get me wrong, great, but it doesn't hold a candle to this. And it's just because those mountains aren't as high that no one kind of does them.
yeah.
But you see them like if you're like what is it, Willow Lake? If you're camping at Willow Lake, you can't help but notice them. You're like, whoa, what's this?
I
What do you do
remember
here?
hiking up Mount Adams and looking at that and being like that's not good.
Oh, yeah, right. That's not good.
I
So
don't
you
know.
do,
I don't want to go
yeah.
over there.
Oh, best stay away.
Yeah, I mean, I'd summited Adams by like 10 in the morning. I was like, I got a whole day here. Maybe I'll go. Oh, no, I'm not going that
No,
way.
no,
I'm going to
no.
go towards Fluted or that
Bad
unnamed
idea there.
one
Yeah,
north of here.
yeah.
So,
So you do Adams, you do Fluted, and then like that's the end of the really cruxy stuff, right? And from there on to Salida, it's all class two talus hopping. It's like 60 miles of it. It's
mhm.
Mm.
like you're pretty home free. This landscape and this terrain that not a lot of people visit. So it's kind of this interesting excuse to go visit some less trodden areas.
So,
And like
I
I
mean,
didn't see anybody.
north of
Huh?
like Cottonwood and all that, it's wilderness at that
Right?
point.
Yeah. Yeah, and I didn't see a soul. It's just no one there. Like again, I didn't see a soul until Salida, where like I come out of the wilderness at the loaf and jug and just like get a Slurpee, which is not a great idea. Like talk about a brain freeze. I was like, oh my god. I've been in like the most exposed area I could possibly find for 6 days, and the first thing I decided to do is like a frozen drink. I was on the floor. Like everyone's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "I'm going to be okay."
Now, how much you say it took you 6 days?
I think it took me 6.5 days
Oh,
in
wow.
2019. So yeah,
Now, was there an earlier effort where you got rained off, or was that later?
that was my first effort. There was two people who did the year before together, and they had like that was the first time I think it's ever been done, honestly. So that was 2018. That was uh I forget who it was. Two very, very good ultra runners, honestly. Like one of the guys I think got third in Western States one year. Like I think that's like I don't think I'm that good of a runner. Like that's good runners. So I love the idea of doing it, and I was like I want to do it again, but I want to start in Salida and go south because I don't think it's ever been done.
Mm.
I'm like why not? Again, like what if I start in Salida? The problem with that is all the difficult terrain you keep to the end where
It's
you're
at
all
the end. Yep.
tired,
Yep.
and like who knows what the weather's going to be like, and like do you really want to face all that kind of stuff? So yeah, I tried 3 times in total to go from north to south. And the first time, yeah, I got blown off of Thirsty Peak, this really wonderful busy site. But yeah, storm came in and ripped my very lightweight tarp to sunder and left me bare. And it was the middle of the night, so I had to wait until the sun came up to figure out where to bail to. It
Yeah.
was it was not a good situation to be in. It's kind of pretty much an emergency situation. But I also had like a baby sack with me, and it was water resistant. And I just kind of like, got into like a fetal position and just waited. I'm like, like a tree's not gonna blow on me. So I'm like, because there are no trees. So I'm like, oh, as long as I'm dry, I'm warm enough. Like, let's just kind of bear and endure
So,
this.
so are you camping above timberline the entire traverse?
Right on
So,
the ridge.
where are you
Yeah.
getting water? I mean, that's just a stupid practical question, but like that's the first thing I I think of
Right,
is like,
right.
where's your water coming from?
On that route specifically, like you have to kind of time it where there's enough snow to collect for water, but not so much snow that it impedes your travel. So yeah, the first time I did, I brought a stove and would melt the snow and make water. The other times I just would let the snow melt naturally.
Hmm.
I would actually put in like a water flask and put the water flask between my backpack and me in my back and just let it like melt. And that was really actually very refreshing as well. So
Mm.
kind of an extreme technique, but it worked well on this route where it's actually a very warm area. It's
Hmm.
a hot range for sure. And I'm genetically engineered to live in like frozen bogs near the Arctic Circle. That's where my people come from. So it was kind of fish out of water for me.
We'll continue our conversation with Justin Simoni on the next episode. In the meantime, feel free to reach out to us at our email address, greensandbluespodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.